The great hall of the Galactic Peace Academy was silent, filled with hundreds of beings from dozens of different worlds. Each seat curved like a bright silver crescent, and every alien face reflected a quiet expectation. They had all gathered to listen to Professor Lyra, the most respected historian of the Empire. Her lectures were famous. Her voice was soft but powerful. Her words always touched hearts. And today her topic was something many were curious about: human resilience. Captain Ward sat in the very last row. He tried to stay unnoticed, hiding in the crowd as if the shadows could protect him. He had come only because he was invited by the Academy itself. He did not want attention. He did not want praise. He wanted silence, peace, anything that did not force him to remember the broken parts inside him. But life rarely gave him what he wanted. The lights dimmed, leaving only a soft golden glow on the circular stage. Lyra walked toward the center. Her long silver markings shimmered gently as she moved, and her silver eyes scanned the audience with warmth. She was calm, graceful, and respected by all. No one who met her ever forgot her presence. "Good evening," she said. Her voice was steady, almost musical. "Today we speak of a species that has changed the galaxy in ways no one predicted." Felt his chest tighten. He knew exactly which species she meant. "Humans," she continued, "are not the strongest. They are not the fastest. They are not the oldest, but they possess something unusual." A hollow image flickered to life behind her. It showed scenes of humans helping other species during the war. Their ships damaged, their soldiers exhausted, yet still fighting to protect worlds that were not even their own. "They carry hope," Lyra said softly, "even when logic says there is none." Many heads nodded in agreement. A few aliens whispered to one another, some remembering battles where humans fought beside them. Others remembered stories they had heard growing up, stories of impossible courage and reckless bravery. But did not nod. He stared at the floor, jaw tight. He did not feel like a symbol of hope, not after everything he had lost. Lyra paced slowly, hands clasped behind her. "Hope is a simple word," she said. "But in humans, hope becomes something powerful, something dangerous, something that spreads." She stopped, and her eyes found the back row. They found him. For a moment froze. He did not expect eye contact. He did not expect to feel the strange warmth that rose in his chest when she looked at him like that, like she saw through the armor he wore around his heart. "Some humans," Lyra continued in a gentler tone, "carry heavy burdens. They lose friends, they lose families, they lose pieces of themselves. And yet, even broken, they stand." Swallowed hard. He wondered if she knew, if she had somehow heard what happened 3 years ago, if she knew the reason he avoided people now, if she understood why he came only because refusing the Academy's invitation would cause questions he didn't want to answer. Lyra turned back toward the audience. "I have studied many species," she said, "but none confuse me more than humans. They cry easily, but they stand again. They fear loss, yet they love deeply. They are fragile, and still they fight." There was a soft murmur of agreement in the hall. "Humans," she said, "are a paradox." A few alien scholars tapped their tablets, taking notes. Some military officers nodded thoughtfully. But Lyra wasn't speaking to them. Not really. Her voice softened even more. "And sometimes," she said, "you meet a human whose courage is not loud, not visible, not spoken, a human who carries pain quietly yet still protects others." Felt something shift inside him, something he had pushed down for years. Lyra took a slow breath. "This lecture is not only about facts," she said. "It is about the hearts behind them, about those who gave more than we could ever measure." Her eyes drifted toward the back row again, toward just for a split second. But that second was enough. His heartbeat rose. Lyra smiled softly, as if encouraging someone invisible. Humanity's greatest strength, she said, is that they never stop trying, even when they have every reason to give up. Closed his eyes. For the first time in years, those words reached him. And they hurt. But they also felt true. The hall was quiet. Every ear strained to catch Lyra's words, but her attention seemed elsewhere. Not on the holograms, not on the notes she had prepared. She was speaking from her heart now, her voice slower, softer, almost trembling with emotion. I have studied many worlds, Lyra said, packing slowly, and every species has its strengths. Some are clever, some are strong, some are patient beyond imagining, but humans are different. Felt a strange pull in his chest. Different? That was not new, but the way she said it, so gentle, so deliberate, made him look up from the shadows he had been hiding in. They fight wars they cannot win, yet they stand. They forgive when forgiveness is impossible. They love when hearts are heavy and broken. And sometimes, she added quietly, they survive tragedies that should have destroyed them completely. Her silver eyes scanned the crowd, but they lingered on him, just long enough to make him uncomfortable. He had been hiding for so long, thinking that no one would ever notice the hollow spaces he carried inside. And yet here she was, seeing it, without a word. I once interviewed many human soldiers after the war, Lyra continued, her voice low and almost confessional. I wanted to understand what drove them. What kept them moving when the galaxy seemed to fall apart around them? His fingers tightened into a fist on his lap. He could feel his pulse in his ears. He did not want to think about that time, about the losses, the screaming alarms, the silence afterward. He had buried it deep, but the mention of soldiers, their stories, stirred something he had not felt in years. There was one human, Lyra said softly, who changed my understanding completely. Not because he was brave in battle, although he was, but because of what he carried inside. Pain, guilt, loss, and still, he never stopped trying to save others. Her voice cracked slightly. She stepped closer to the front of the stage, lowering her gaze almost as if she were speaking to herself. He believed the war was his fault. Every casualty, every failed mission, he blamed himself. And yet he kept going. He saved lives. He protected those who could not protect themselves, and in his silence I realized something extraordinary. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to move forward, even when your heart is heavy, even when your soul feels shattered. Felt a lump in his throat. He recognized the description. Every word echoed the years he had spent shouldering the memories of that war, the nights he could not sleep, the sounds that haunted him, the faces he would never forget. The audience watched, mesmerized. Many were moved, some were nodding in admiration, some whispered softly to each other. But noticed something else, the intensity in her silver eyes, the way they seemed to pierce through the distance between them, the way they seemed personal. Lyra looked down at her notes but did not speak. Then, after a long pause, she lifted her eyes to the audience again. This human taught me a lesson I could never have learned from books. He reminded me that strength is not measured by victory or conquest. Strength is measured by the heart's ability to endure, to forgive, to keep giving, even when nothing seems left to give. His chest tightened. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. She was speaking about him, about his life, about the years of pain he had tried to hide from everyone. And so, Lyra said, taking a slow breath, I tell you this not to praise him, not to make him a symbol, but because the universe needs to understand this truth. Humans, especially those who have suffered, carry hope that no one else can. Hope that heals, hope that inspires, hope that changes worlds. The hall was silent. Not a sound, not even a whisper. Every being felt the weight of her words. Every human present felt the sting of recognition, the ache of memory, and the quiet pride that came with survival. Looked down at his hands. For the first time in years he felt seen, not as a soldier, not as a captain, not as a survivor or a casualty of fate, but as a human. as someone who had endured and kept going. Lyra's eyes swept over the audience again, but she paused on him one more time. Just a fraction of a second, but long enough for him to realize she knew. She had seen through the walls he had built. She had recognized the broken, weary part of him that no one else had dared to approach. And for the first time in a long time, felt a flicker of something he thought he had lost forever: connection. The lecture was no longer just a lecture. It was a bridge. A reminder that humans, despite all their flaws, their failures, and their pain, were capable of touching hearts in ways no weapon, no ship, no technology could ever achieve. Exhaled slowly. He did not understand how a lecture, a voice, could reach him like this. But it did. And deep inside, a seed of hope long buried and almost forgotten began to stir. The hall was still, but a subtle tension filled the air. Lyra paused, letting the silence stretch longer than usual. Her silver eyes swept over the audience, and then, almost imperceptibly, they landed on Ward, that small, tired human in the last row, hunched in the shadows. He looked smaller than he had in memory, weighed down not by armor, but by years of loss and guilt. His pulse quickened. He didn't want to be noticed. He didn't want anyone to see the cracks in his facade. He had spent years learning to hide behind duty, behind a mask of control. And yet somehow her gaze found him anyway. Lyra's voice softened, becoming almost a whisper. "I have spoken of humans as a species, but sometimes it is not the species that matters. It is the individual." The audience leaned forward, sensing the shift in tone. Something in her voice had become personal, vulnerable. "There was a human," she continued, "who carried more than any person should. Pain, loss, responsibility that weighed heavier than any armor. And yet," he continued, "he moved forward when the world around him crumbled. He gave when he had nothing left to give, and he inspired others without even realizing it." His chest tightened. Each word she spoke pierced him gently, painfully, like a melody he remembered but had long stopped listening to. He had spent years believing he was alone in his pain, believing that no one could understand. Yet here she was, telling the world about him, as if she had seen the very corners of his heart he had tried to hide. Lyra paused again. She looked down at her notes, but she did not need them. Her words were no longer meant for the audience. They were meant for him. "The human I speak of," she said softly, "taught me something I could never have learned from books, from history, or from the stars themselves. He taught me that courage is not always loud, that strength is not always visible, that even in silence, even in grief, the human heart can shine brighter than any sun." His hands clenched. He could feel the raw truth of her words pressing against him. He wanted to look away, to hide, but he couldn't. There was a magnetic pull he couldn't resist, a strange mix of fear and longing that made his chest ache. "And sometimes," Lyra continued, her voice trembling just slightly, "you meet a human whose presence stays with you, not because of what they do, but because of who they are. Their spirit lingers in your thoughts. Their courage echoes in your dreams. Their silence can speak louder than words." A subtle gasp ran through the audience, but it was almost drowned out by the weight of the moment. Every eye in the hall seemed to sense that this lecture was no longer an academic exercise. It had become confession, revelation. Lyra took a slow step closer to the edge of the stage. She looked directly at him now, and for the first time the rest of the audience blurred into shadows. It was just him and her. "I speak these truths openly because they must be known," she said. "Not to glorify him, but to honor the spirit that refuses to break. The human spirit, the spirit I have come to understand because of him." Felt tears sting the corners of his eyes. He wanted to look away. He wanted to retreat. But something inside him urged him to stay. She was speaking to him, and yet she wasn't speaking his name. Yet every syllable landed with perfect precision, cutting through the years he had spent hiding. He remembered the nights of silence, the hollow spaces in his heart, the faces of those he couldn't save. And now her words, soft and unyielding, seemed to reach into those spaces, brushing against the pain with gentle understanding. "You may wonder," Lyra said, her voice lowering almost to a whisper, "why a historian would speak like this. Why I would speak of one individual in front of the galaxy. But some stories, some lives, deserve to be honored not for fame, but for the courage they embody. And this human," she hesitated, swallowing, "this human changed the way I see all life. He made me understand that even the broken can inspire, that even those who have suffered most can still be luminous." Felt something shift inside him. The tight coil of guilt and grief loosened slightly. For the first time in years, he did not feel invisible, not as a soldier, not as a survivor, not even as a failure, but as a human, as someone who mattered. Lyra's gaze remained locked on him, softening, almost trembling. For a fleeting moment, words hung unspoken between them. Something unacknowledged, yet undeniable, passed in that silence. A recognition of shared pain, of mutual understanding, of a connection that transcended species, time, and sorrow. And in that moment, realized that this lecture had already become something more than academic. It had become a bridge. A moment that might change everything he thought he knew about himself and perhaps about hope. The hall was quiet, but the air had changed. It was heavier now, electric, with a tension no one else could name. Sat frozen, his hands gripping the edge of his chair, though he didn't realize he was doing it. Lyra's words had always been meaningful, but now they were personal, intimate. The kind of words that left a mark on the heart. She set her notes aside. For the first time in the lecture, she was no longer speaking from history or research. She was speaking from herself, from something deep and fragile she had kept hidden. "Today," she said softly, "I speak not only as a historian, not only as a teacher, but as someone who learned from a human. Not just any human, someone whose courage and spirit stayed with me long after our first meeting." His breath caught, his pulse hammered in his ears. He had long trained himself to ignore compliments, to let admiration slide off him like water on armor. But this was different. This was a human truth, a heart speaking to a heart, and the truth was directed at him. The audience shifted slightly, sensing the intimacy, but they couldn't see the weight of the moment. They didn't see the old, invisible scars that marked the human in the last row. They didn't see the walls he had built around his heart, walls she had already begun to touch. "I've met countless beings across the galaxy," Lyra continued, her voice quivering slightly. "And yet no one has ever made me feel what he made me feel. Humans confuse me, yes, but sometimes they also awaken something I never knew existed inside me." Swallowed hard, he could feel the warmth rising in his chest, the stirrings of emotion he had buried for years. She wasn't speaking about duty. She wasn't speaking about heroism in battle. She was speaking about him, about his humanity. Lyra inhaled slowly. Her eyes softened, shimmering under the lights. She paused for a long moment, then whispered words that made the room hold its collective breath. "If you were single..." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Some didn't even realize she had left the sentence unfinished, but heard it clearly. Every word struck him like a starship breaking through the void. "I would have asked you to stay not as a captain, not as a soldier, not as a story in my research, but as someone I cared for, someone I wanted to know, someone whose presence could make the universe seem less heavy." His throat tightened. His hands fell to his lap. He didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or run. The truth of her confession, the vulnerability in her silver eyes, the weight of her words, it was all too much. "I never spoke before," she continued, her voice shaking with the effort of honesty. "Because you were taken, and I respected that, I honored it. But still, I carried this quietly because humans taught me something that no book or history could. Love, even unspoken, can be a strength." The hall was silent. Every alien, every student, every diplomat seemed frozen in time, though none could understand the storm raging between the two of them. Remembered the years since the war, the nights spent alone, the silence of a home that once held love and warmth. His wife had been gone for 3 years now, and he had thought he would never feel anything close to connection again. And yet, here was Lyra, standing before him, speaking truths that he never imagined could touch him. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he could feel the weight of the years, the guilt, the grief, the loneliness, and the quiet hope that had never died completely. Her words had not just reached him, they had begun to heal him. Lyra stepped closer to the edge of the stage. Her voice became a whisper meant only for him, though the entire hall could hear. "I am not asking for anything in return," she said softly. "I only needed to say it, because humans, especially the ones who endure so much, deserve to know when they are seen, when they are remembered, when they are appreciated beyond words." His chest ached and tears pricked his eyes. He wanted to deny it, to tell her it was too late, to tell her he was beyond hope. But a part of him, the part he had hidden, locked away, thought dead, stirred in response. He realized something then, something he hadn't felt in years. Her words, her honesty, her courage to speak even in front of an entire audience, they had awakened a spark he thought had been extinguished forever. The hall remained silent, but inside that silence, two souls, one human, one stood on the edge of something new. Something dangerous, something fragile, but something achingly real. Lyra's silver eyes held his gaze, unwavering, as if daring him to respond, to acknowledge the truth she had revealed. And though the words were simple, the meaning behind them was monumental. His heart beat faster. He realized he could not ignore this. He could not hide anymore, because sometimes hope arrived in ways you did not expect, and sometimes it arrived just when you needed it most. The words lingered in the hall like a fragile light in the darkness. "If you were single," the sentence echoed in his mind, repeating, growing louder than the murmurs of the audience. His chest felt tight. His hands trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. He had never expected a lecture to reach him like this. Not academically, not personally, not emotionally. And yet here he was, feeling something he had thought buried forever. He could barely lift his gaze, afraid to meet Lyra's eyes, yet drawn to them as if gravity itself pulled him forward. They were soft, vulnerable, and real, unlike any human eyes he had seen. She had spoken to him directly, without words of his name, but every syllable was meant for him. "I started," but the words caught in his throat. He had no idea what to say. He had spent years hiding, convincing himself that no one could understand, that no one could see the pain etched into his bones. And now, in front of the entire hall, someone did. Lyra stepped forward, her silver markings gleaming softly under the hall lights. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I know this may be unexpected, and I should not have said it here. I did not mean to overwhelm you, Captain Ward, I only—" "You don't understand," interrupted, his voice low but steady. His heart pounded as if it wanted to escape. I'm not what you think I am." She tilted her head slightly, her eyes still fixed on him. "Then tell me," she said gently, "tell me what I don't understand." His hands trembled more now. Memories he had long buried rushed back. The screams of the battlefield, the weight of lives lost on his shoulders, the silence of home after tragedy. His chest ached as he remembered her, the life he had loved and lost. His wife, gone 3 years ago, her laughter, her touch, the warmth that was now just a shadow. "My wife," he whispered, voice breaking. "She died 3 years ago." The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Lyra's breath caught. Her silver eyes softened even more, filling with a tenderness he had never expected from anyone, alien or human. "I didn't know," she murmured, her voice almost breaking. "I never knew." Looked down, ashamed. He had spent years thinking he could face the universe alone, thinking that no one could reach the broken parts of him. But here was Lyra, seeing him, understanding him, without judgment, without fear. "And your words," said slowly, his voice stronger now, they brought back memories I've tried to forget. But they also remind me that I'm still alive." Lyra's hand moved instinctively, reaching out, almost as if to bridge the distance between them. She didn't touch him, not yet, but the gesture carried more meaning than 1,000 words. "You survived," she said softly, "and that alone is something to honor, something I wanted you to know." Swallowed hard, the tightness in his chest loosened just a fraction. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a captain, not as a soldier, not as a statistic of war, but as a human being, as someone who had endured, who had survived, and who could, perhaps, still feel. "You spoke," he continued, his voice trembling with emotion, "as if you saw all of me, even the parts I hide, and I felt it, everything. Your words, they reach places I thought were dead." The audience remained quiet, sensing something monumental unfolding between the two of them. No one moved, no one whispered. This was not a lecture anymore. It was something far more fragile and extraordinary, a meeting of two souls, one human, one touching in ways the galaxy could not measure. Lyra's lips quivered slightly. "I did not mean to overwhelm you," she whispered. "I only wanted you to know that someone noticed, that someone recognized your pain, that you were seen, not for what you did, but for who you are." His chest ached, but for the first time it wasn't just pain. It was also warmth, a quiet hope, fragile and uncertain, but real. He took a slow breath, letting it fill him, letting it anchor him. "And it matters," he said, voice low but steady. "It matters more than I can explain, that someone sees me, that someone understands, that someone still cares." Lyra's silver eyes glistened with unshed tears. She nodded barely, as if acknowledging the truth of his words. "It does matter," she whispered. "And I want you to know that you are not alone, not anymore." Exhaled, feeling a weight lift just slightly from his shoulders. The walls he had built around his heart began to crack just a little. The space he had locked away for grief, guilt, and loss, Lyra had touched it. Carefully, gently, without forcing, without fear. And in that quiet moment, both of them realized something. The lecture had changed everything. The audience could not understand, but they didn't need to. What mattered was here in this fragile, emotional truth between a human and a... For it was not a promise, not yet, but it was a bridge, a beginning. And sometimes he thought quietly that is more than enough to start healing. The hall remained silent, but the weight of the moment pressed on both of them. Could feel it in his chest, a strange mixture of fear, hope, and something unfamiliar, possibility. He had spent years hiding behind discipline and duty, thinking emotions were a weakness. And yet here they were, overwhelming him in ways he had never expected. Lyra stood near the stage's edge, her silver eyes fixed on him. She was calm, but the slightest tremor in her hands betrayed the intensity of what she felt. She had shared more than a lecture today. She had shared truth. And now she waited, not for applause, not for acknowledgement, but for a response from the human who had unknowingly shaped her understanding of courage and love. "You once told me humans confuse you," said quietly, his voice low but steady, trembling slightly with unspoken emotion. "You're not wrong, we do. And yet sometimes we do exactly what no one expects. Sometimes we survive, sometimes we heal, sometimes we allow ourselves to feel again even after everything has been lost." Lyra's eyes softened further. She stepped slightly closer, her silver markings catching the soft glow of the hall's lights. "I have seen so many beings across the galaxy," she admitted softly. "Some are clever, some are strong, some are fearless, but humans, they endure. They endure when nothing seems left to endure. They keep giving, keep fighting, keep loving, even when the odds are impossible." Felt warmth spread slowly through his chest. Her words, they were not just observations. They were recognition, understanding, compassion, and in a way he had not anticipated, they were an invitation to hope again. "I didn't know if I could feel anything after she died," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I thought grief would always be heavier than hope. I thought I had lost the ability to care, to love, to trust again. But today, he paused, swallowing hard. Today, you reminded me. You reminded me that life can still carry moments of light, that even broken hearts can find a path forward. Lyra's gaze softened even more, tears glistening in the corners of her eyes. She whispered, I never wanted anything from you. I only wanted to honor what you carried inside. I wanted to show you that the human spirit, even and worn, is extraordinary, and that someone somewhere sees it, feels it, respects it. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words settle into him. For years he had carried guilt, grief, and fear like heavy armor. And yet here was someone, not human, not bound by his world, who could touch the cracks beneath the surface and make him feel whole, even for a moment. You have a way of seeing, he said softly, almost to himself. Seeing what others overlook, feeling what others cannot feel. You remind me that I am more than my failures, that I am still capable of hope, that I am still alive. Lyra smiled, faint and trembling, and took a careful step closer. And that matters, she said. More than you know, it always matters. The audience, though still silent, seemed to fade from their perception. It was as if time itself had slowed, leaving only the two of them in that quiet space. A human and two souls bound by understanding, loss, and the fragile hope of new beginnings. Exhaled slowly, letting the tension leave his shoulders. He realized he did not have to pretend anymore. He did not have to hide the scars, the memories, or the longing. Here was someone who saw them and still offered recognition, still offered connection, still offered understanding. Your words, they do more than teach, he said quietly. They heal, they inspire, they remind me that life can still matter even after pain, that, even after losing everything, one can still find a way forward. Lyra's hand moved slightly, hovering near his, an unspoken offer of comfort. Sometimes, she said softly, all we need is someone to remind us that we are not alone, that even when the world seems cruel, even when we feel broken, there is still connection. There is still hope. Nodded slowly, feeling tears prick his eyes. He did not need words beyond that. He did not need grand gestures or promises. Her presence, her understanding, her courage to speak the truth, it was enough. It reminded him that the human spirit, his spirit, was stronger than he had thought. And maybe, he said quietly, a faint smile breaking through the shadow of his grief, that is what humans do best. We keep walking, we keep caring, we keep hopping. And sometimes we allow someone to walk beside us. Lyra's silver eyes glimmered with emotion. Then I will walk, she said softly, slowly, carefully, as long as you allow it. And in that quiet hall, amid the fading murmurs and the distant stars outside, felt a spark he had not felt in years. A spark of possibility, of trust, of healing. It was fragile, it was uncertain, but it was real. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to hope. The hall was quiet, yet the energy between and Lyra felt electric, almost tangible. Every eye in the room could sense something extraordinary had unfolded, though none could fully understand it. Time seemed suspended. Outside, the stars of a distant galaxy shimmered softly through the vast glass windows, as if witnessing the fragile moment themselves. Took a slow, steadying breath. He felt the weight of years, the grief, the guilt, the endless solitude, lifting just a little. Lyra's presence was not overpowering. It was gentle, patient, and unwavering. She did not demand anything from him. She simply offered recognition, understanding, and unexpectedly hope. You once wished I were single, he said softly, almost as a question to himself, a tentative echo of what she had whispered. His lips curved into a faint, nervous smile. You didn't know, but today I truly am. Lyra's eyes widened for a moment, glistening with tears she did not fully try to hide. Her hand hovered close, an invitation and a promise rolled into one. Only if your heart is ready, she said gently. I would never take the place of someone you loved. Love does not replace, it honors. and if you are ready, we walk forward together. Exhaled slowly, feeling a rush of emotions he had long believed buried forever. Loss, pain, grief, and now possibility, hope, connection. He realized that he was not broken, not beyond repair. He had been surviving all this time, yes, but surviving was different from living, and perhaps, finally, he could begin to live again. No one replaces anyone, he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Love isn't a room with one chair, it's a journey, and maybe I can walk again, maybe with you. Lyra smiled, faintly trembling, her silver eyes bright with emotion. Then I will walk, she whispered, her voice soft, careful, reverent. Slowly, at your pace, for as long as you need, and I will not rush you nor judge your heart. I will only be here with you. Felt warmth fill the hollow spaces inside him. He looked at her, really looked for the first time. Beyond the lecture, beyond the stories of war and history, beyond even the bright hall filled with eyes, he saw a being who understood courage, strength, and the delicate fragility of life. A being who valued him not for what he had done, but for who he was. He began, faltering as the words choked in his throat. He wanted to say something profound, something perfect. But he realized that words were unnecessary. His hand reached out slowly, almost tentatively, and hers met it halfway. The touch was electric, yet gentle, an acknowledgement of shared pain and shared hope. For a moment neither spoke. The world outside the hall faded. The murmurs of the audience, the distant hum of the stars, the holograms flickering silently, all disappeared. There was only this moment, only this connection, only this fragile beginning. You have no idea how much courage it took, Lyra whispered, her thumb brushing lightly against his hand. To survive, to continue, to be here now, allowing yourself to feel again. Nodded, blinking back tears he had long convinced himself he did not deserve to shed. I don't think anyone has ever really seen me like this before, he admitted softly. Not even me. And now I feel like I can start again, not alone, not hiding, but with someone who understands. Lyra's lips curved into a soft, warm smile, and for the first time felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. The lecture, the audience, the galaxy itself, all of it faded to insignificance compared to the quiet truth of two beings standing together, fragile yet unbroken, ready to begin something new. Inhaled, feeling the cool, recycled air of the hall mix with the warmth of emotion blossoming inside him. Then let's walk, he said quietly, his voice filled with a mixture of relief, anticipation, and tentative joy. Lyra nodded, gently squeezing his hand. Together, she whispered. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. Not a grand battle, not a moment of galactic history, but something far more human. Two souls, both by loss, pain, and time, had found a bridge to one another. And in finding that bridge, they had discovered the essence of what humans had always been capable of. Hope, resilience, and the power to love again. The hall erupted in soft murmurs, some curious, some quietly approving, but Lyra barely noticed. They did not need the recognition. They had something infinitely more important. Each other, fragile yet steadfast, ready to navigate a universe that had once seemed cold and indifferent. It was not a promise. It was not a confession of forever. It was something, the acknowledgement that even after great loss, even after years of grief and solitude, the human spirit, and the spirit of those who truly see it, can create a beginning. A new chapter. A quiet, powerful start. And as Lyra stepped forward together, side by side, a simple truth settled between them, one that could change the course of a lifetime. Sometimes the most extraordinary battles are not fought with weapons or strategy, but with courage, honesty, and the willingness to allow oneself to hope again. And in the HFY universe, there was nothing more human or more powerful than that.